Government. It's everywhere. But for those of us looking for the ultimate escape from Big Brother, there's no better choice than the only U.S. city with no laws. Known as Slab City, this little slice of libertarian paradise is situated about 50 miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border, right in the heart of the Sonora Desert. This place gets its name from the large concrete slabs, which are all that remains of the barracks that once housed U.S. Marines during World War II. At the time, the U.S. ran a research center looking into the effects of desert conditions on concrete, as well as techniques for building with concrete in high-temperature environments. Each batch of concrete is specially made for its specific environment, and the careful chemistry can be disrupted with disastrous results. Thanks to the Sonora Desert's 105+ degree temperatures, which can reach as much as a whopping 118 degrees, the place was the perfect proving ground for researching concrete curing techniques in very high-temperature environments. After the U.S. Marine Corps moved out, new residents moved in. Drifters, the homeless, adventurers, and those simply seeking to live off the grid found a place to be the perfect home. Technically, a city only in name, Slab City has no government oversight and no government services. There's no police, no fire department, or medical services to call in an emergency. Likewise, there's no city maintenance to repair broken roads or buildings crumbling apart. With no sewage system, residents must dispose of their own waste. And you can forget about powering your favorite electronics, as there's no public electricity available. So how do the residents survive? Mostly by being extremely independent, though a certain sense of community still prevails. While you'd expect the place to devolve into a lawless den of villainy, the truth is slappers, as they call themselves, tend to like good neighbors no different than you and I. Drug use may be tolerated as long as it doesn't interfere with your neighbors, and disputes are rare and often handled internally. Surprisingly, there's been few incidents of violence amongst the 150 or so strong year-round population. As far as maintenance goes, neighbors tend to help neighbors out with jobs too difficult or labor-intensive for any one person. Mirroring the lifestyle of our ancestors, very few people have working automobiles, and the original roads built by the government still remain largely drivable. Though this being the high desert, dirt roads are often forged by vehicles to circumvent any rough spots in the asphalt that remain. This is one place where nobody's gonna yell at you for being a bad driver unless you run into someone else or into someone's makeshift home. Residents have made their home out of any available materials, with some trucking in storage crates or similar building materials to make a home out of. The concrete remains of the government buildings still standing are often appropriated by Slab City homesteaders, and during the summer there's a healthy amount of tents. As far as electricity, while there are no public services available, some residents generate their own electricity with solar panels and gas or diesel generators. Some residents have even set up windmills, which are a perfect fit for the perpetually windy Sonora Desert. For food and water, though, the residents have to hit up the local town of Nyland, which is about 4 miles away. There, residents can stock up on plastic water bottles, canned foods, and other survival necessities, including the ever-necessary toilet paper. Bathrooms in Slab City are kind of a personal affair, though, and often you'll end up having to dig your own hole. Covering it up is pretty much mandatory, as poor hygiene is frowned upon by residents. So is building your poop hole in a neighbor's yard or in a frequently traveled thoroughfare. If you're planning on making Slab City your new home, it's important to practice proper poop etiquette. The population of 150 or so fluctuates with the season, as a large portion of the population tends to be snowbirds or individuals fleeing colder temperatures up north. This part of the population sets up shop at Slab City during the colder winter months for about 4 to 5 months at a time before returning north. However, even in temperatures that reach 120 degrees during Slab City's summer, you'll still find a thriving population in this city without laws. Well, not quite without laws. While there might be no municipal laws, this doesn't mean that Slab City is truly lawless. Technically, every piece of sovereign U.S. territory is subject to state and federal laws, unless it's not a state, in which case federal laws still apply. That means that far from a true libertarian paradise, Slab City is still technically subject to the same everyday laws that you and I have to deal with. That means no murdering just because you're bored or lost at a game of cards, and no producing illegal narcotics for sale or recreational use. Technically, Slab City residents still have to file taxes and report any income. Enforcement, however, is another matter altogether, and with no permanent police presence, federal and state laws are more guidelines than hard and fast rules. Slab City is, for better or worse, largely self-governing, though authorities will still step in for major reported crimes, if anyone actually reports them. Unsurprisingly, the population of Slab City tends to be drawn to the location because of their mistrust or outright hatred of any authority figure. While Vegas may claim that anything happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, the very misleading slogan actually applies to Slab City more than the City of Sin. But if you really want to get away from Big Brother, you'll probably have to go to one of these most lawless places on Earth. If the high desert environment of Slab City beckons you, why not head on over to a truly lawless state such as Libya? With the death of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya has descended into chaos. The strong man might might have been a brutal dictator, but under his rule, Libya at least enjoyed the strong rule of law. Surprisingly, women enjoyed far more freedoms than most other Muslim nations, and education was free. A dictator is still a dictator, though, and rebels toppled Gaddafi in 2011 for his many abuses against his citizens. Since then, the country has splintered with various factions vying for control. At the top of this power struggle is Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibah, who is the leader of the only internationally recognized government and based out of Tripoli. His major opposition is Khalifa Haftar, who leads the Libyan Nation Army and controls most of eastern and southern Libya. Even ISIS has its own state in Libya until recently, when the world collectively sent them to meet their makers throughout the latter half of the 2010s. This still leaves Libya a highly splintered and lawless country, with many charming slices of Libya up for grabs for the nearest strongman. Even within zones claimed by one faction or another, lawlessness prevails, and the rule of law is hardly if ever enforced. But if you'd still like the comforts of a major city without pesky laws, then a trip to Ras Khamis should be in your future travel plans. The Israeli-Palestinian struggle has raged for decades and has left one tiny slice of territory basically completely void of any sort of authority. The neighborhood of Ras Khamis technically is part of Jerusalem, though the mayor of Jerusalem refuses to acknowledge it as such. Cut off from the rest of Israel by a massive wall erected by the government, Ras Khamis is also technically inside Israeli-controlled territory, but the government has so far left the place to its own devices. Even Palestine has pretty much ignored Ras Khamis. What might be surprising is that we're not talking about a few dozen people in one tiny neighborhood. We're talking about a population of 20,000 people who have had to basically govern themselves. After neither Israeli or Palestinian authorities would see to their city services, the residents of Ras Khamis took their matters into their own hands and simply paved their own roads. They've even built up skyscrapers without any sort of government oversight. One hopes that they've at least abided by some sort of construction code. There's technically no taxes, though a local city council established by residents does take up collections from time to time for city services. This still leaves the area struggling with water supplies and basic essentials such as trash pickup. In response, residents have taken up the legal cause with the Israeli government, claiming that being part of their territory entitles them to civic services. So far, though, the residents have had to make do for themselves, and judging by how well they've managed to thrive, they're doing a good job at it. Though functioning city services would make life a whole lot better for all. But if proximity to the Israeli-Palestinian dispute makes you nervous, then perhaps you'd prefer a more remote region that has no laws. Located on the Palestinian-Afghanistan border, a region known as FATA, or Federally Administered Tribal Areas, is notorious for being the modern version of the lawless American Wild West. This region is well known to the American military leaders and the global intelligence community, as it's the safe haven and breeding grounds for an alphabet soup's worth of terrorist groups. That's thanks to the fact that though the place is technically within Pakistan's territory, no Pakistani government yet has dared to try and actually govern it. The area is littered with various tribal groups all fiercely loyal to their own, but more than willing to band together to keep out any authority figure they disagree with. The lawlessness has attracted dozens of different criminal and terrorist groups, which makes the area their home. In response, the United States has spent millions in intelligence gathering and used drones to attack terror targets in the region, as Pakistan forbade the US from using ground forces to eliminate terror networks operating there. This is a place where might makes right, so if you plan on moving there, you better bring a few very well-armed friends. As long as you're not rude to your neighbors and have the firepower to defend your claim, the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan can be your new home away from home. Our next destination overthrew both hostile drug cartels and corrupt government leaders to declare itself autonomous. Cherán, Mexico, a town once ruled by drug lords and corrupt politicians in service to those drug lords. Once, Mexican cartels plundered the natural resources of the city, conducting illegal lumber operations and forcing locals out of the industry. Politicians elected with the help of the cartels turned a blind eye to this, as well as to the frequent extortion rackets run by the cartels on local businesses. Then a group of women decided to change everything. First, they approached the illegal lumberjacks, but were chased away with guns and the threat of violence. They resolved themselves to stop the illegal lumber operation in town by stopping the trucks driving through it, where they'd be close enough to their neighbors that they could call for help. The plan worked, and as the trucks were stopped, outraged locals ran to help with machetes and their personal rifles. Soon there was a confrontation between the local police and the armed loggers, with the police on the side of the loggers and the 20,000-strong population of Cherán. The locals quickly set up their own militia and drove the cartels, their illegal logging operation, and the police and elected officials out of town. Government parties were outright banned, as they were seen as causing division between the people, and armed checkpoints set up throughout the city to prevent cartel gangs from trying to reclaim the town. The militia also serves as a police force, with penalties to minor offenders including fines and community service. Any serious offenses are referred to the state's attorney general, though incredibly the city has had very few serious crimes since the government and cartels were kicked out. So far, Mexico has been happy to leave the city as a semi-autonomous entity, and the cartels haven't dared to return yet. Women comment that they feel safe to walk in the streets at night, and the massive forest that surrounds the city has been preserved by the armed patrols of the Ronda Comunitaria, the name of Chiron's militia. Now anyone seeking to conduct logging in the protected forest must get permission directly from the self-appointed authorities. Not quite fully independent, Chiron still receives federal and state funding and is recognized as an indigenous Purépecha community by Mexican laws. Even its ban on political parties has so far been upheld by Mexican courts. In a city ravaged by cartel violence, Chiron is a beacon of hope, and in the future may encourage other Mexican cities to take matters into their own hands when the government is helpless against the mighty cartels. Now go check out crazy laws that still exist around the world, or click this other video instead.